In the year 1162, along the banks of the Onon River, a baby named Temujin came into the world clutching a blood clot in his fist. A divine omen indicating this child was destined to be a powerful leader and great warrior. He would rise to become Genghis Khan, a brilliant military commander and statesman, conqueror of kingdoms, founder of the largest contiguous land empire in history, and the distant ancestor of millions of people alive today. But Temujin was not born into an empire. He was born into a world of rival tribes, fragile alliances, and violence. To understand Genghis Khan, we first have to understand the world that created him, the Eurasian Steppe. The Eurasian Steppe is an immense belt of open grassland stretching 5,000 miles, from Hungary in the west to Manchuria in the east. Across much of the region, scorching summers, freezing winters, and as little as 10 to 20 inches of rainfall each year made dependable agriculture extremely difficult or impossible. But the steppe possessed one resource in extraordinary abundance: grass. The steppe's enormous seas of grass could support equally enormous herds of animals for its people to shepherd. The difficult climate of the steppe led its inhabitants to refuse agriculture and long-term shelter in favor of nomadic pastoralism. Inhabitants would move with their herds, living in temporary shelter, the most common of which was the yurt, a tent-like structure made from a collapsible wooden frame, sheep's wool felt coverings, and leather or animal hair ropes. Wealth on the steppe did not look the same as it did in other places. It was not measured in houses, expensive garments, or coin. Instead, it was measured in animals. The bigger the herd, the richer the person who shepherded it. This basis for wealth made fortunes extremely volatile. Others taking your herd, a bad season, a freak disaster, could wipe out fortunes overnight with little to no warning. The long migrations the people of the European steppe made were seasonal. Groups traveled in search of better pastures, weather, and water. Staying too long at a certain pasture would strip the land. A particularly icy winter could prevent animals from being able to reach the grass underneath, sometimes wiping out entire herds. Migration meant constant alertness and readiness to fight, since wealth in livestock is, by definition, highly vulnerable to raiding, reaving, and rustling. So, what animals made up the herds? The people of the steppe owned 5 animals: goats for food, milk, and cheese, sheep for food, clothing, and the construction of shelter, cattle as beasts of burden used to pull heavy carts and yurts during seasonal migrations across the steppe. Camels would carry heavy cargo while being able to survive the harshest and most arid conditions. Finally, there wouldn't be a video about Genghis Khan in the steppe without mentioning it: the horse. The horse was the most prized animal on the steppe. As one Mongolian saying puts it, a Mongol without a horse is like a bird without wings. Mongol horses were not the towering war horses of medieval Europe. They were shorter, stockier, and more resilient. The Mongol horse was an animal of incredible stamina, capable of galloping 6 miles without break. These horses were perfectly suited to the open grasslands. They allowed people to manage enormous herds, hunt game, trade with one another, migrate from pasture to pasture, and wage war with one another. On the steppe, the horse was the engine that propelled life, culture, and society forward. Men, women, and children of the steppe were all expected to be masters of the horse. Children rode horses from the instant of birth to get used to the motions of riding. There are several stories of children who could ride a horse before they could walk. Inhabitants of the steppe would fire arrows from horseback and found it easier to do so on a galloping horse than on a cantering or trotting one, or even on flat ground. In adulthood, the skills required of a mounted warrior, balance, endurance, navigation, horsemanship, and archery were already second nature. Mongols developed mastery in hunting, large-scale coordinated movement across vast distances, shooting while riding, surviving with limited supplies, switching between several horses, sleeping and eating during long journeys, and enduring harsh weather and open terrain. During the great hunts of the steppe, hundreds of riders could spread across the landscape in a vast line, driving animals inward while maintaining their positions over miles of open ground. A rider who broke formation would allow prey to escape. The skills used in these hunts, coordination, discipline, communication, riding, and mountain archery, were all skills that would be invaluable in a military context. The horse transformed the environmental demands of the steppe into a military advantage. The vast distances from pasture to pasture made speed and endurance necessary parts of life. Riders learned to navigate without roads, move with limited supplies, and switch from horse to avoid exhausting. Communities learned to pack quickly, travel as units, and guard livestock. The environment of the steppe did not simply produce warriors, it produced an entire society already organized around mobility, endurance, horsemanship, and survival. So why hadn't this militant population already conquered several kingdoms? This brings us to the politics of the steppe. The steppe was deeply politically fragmented. Warriors were not united under a common leader or organized into a massive army. Instead, the people of the steppe were divided into tribes, held together by fragile alliances, and often engaged in constant conflict with one another. The people of the steppe would gather behind local warlords who, in exchange, would fight other warlords, and the people gathered behind them for the best grazing land for his followers. Their herds would die, and they would desert or kill him. The followers would then either die themselves or join another warlord until inevitably the process repeated. There was no central government, no borders, and no Mongol state. Leaders built power through marriage alliances, military victories, and the distribution of livestock won in combat. Successful warlords attracted thousands of followers and were just as quickly abandoned after a single defeat or failed migration. By the middle of the 12th century, the eastern steppe was divided among several competing peoples and confederations. The Mongols, scattered, fierce, and deeply divided. The Tatars, powerful, politically connected, and backed with their relationship to northern China. The Merkit, hard-riding raiders known for violence, kidnapping, and stealing. The Kariot, wealthy, influential, and the most sophisticated power in central Mongolia. The Naiman, large, organized, and formidable, the heavyweight power of the western steppe. These groups all competed with one another for land, livestock, trade, and power within the steppe. It's important to note that the steppe was not isolated from the outside world. Immediately to the south were wealthy Chinese states possessing metal goods, grain, silk, and other luxuries. Steppe leaders competed for access to this wealth. The Chinese rewarded friendly tribes and turned rival leaders against one another. In many ways, the Chinese saw what the people of the steppe did not, that if they were unified, they would be powerful enough to conquer entire kingdoms and continents into perfect warriors. They were, however, wasting their unrivaled strength against one another. The 5 confederations all had grand ambitions and large followings, but what none of them had was the power to unite the steppe. The steppe was a sleeping giant, and soon one man would wake it and unite its people into the most dominant military force the world has ever seen. In 1162, beside the Onon River, with the blood clot in his fist, that man had been born. His name was Temujin.